Chapter 5, The Probation and Penance, telling how Yogi Milarepa obeyed the commands of his guru Marpa, thereby suffering strange trials and great tribulations, and of how in despondency he 3 times deserted Marpa and sought another guru, and then returned to Marpa. I now went forth in search of alms up and down the whole Lobrock Valley, whereby I obtained 420 measures of barley. With 280 of them, I purchased a big copper vessel, free from speck or flaw inside and outside, and having 4 handles, one on each of 4 sides. With 20 measures, I procured meat and chang. The remaining 120 measures I put into a big sack, and putting the copper vessel on top of it, I carried the whole home to my guru's dwelling. Arriving there somewhat fatigued, I happened to throw down my load a bit heavily, so that it made the house tremble a little. This seemed to make my guru angry, for he jumped to his feet, saying, "Ha! Thou appearest to be a particularly strong little devotee. Dost thou wish to kill all of us too, shaking the house down by mere physical strength? Out with thy sack." And he kicked the sack out of the house so that I was obliged to place it outside. At the time, I thought that my guru was simply a little short-tempered, and that I must be careful to behave properly in his presence. I was not the least shaken in faith in him. Then, after emptying the copper vessel, I again took it into the house and, bowing down, offered it to the Lama. He accepted it by laying his hand on it, and then, without removing his hand from it, he remained for a while with his eyes closed in prayer. His invocation ended, I could see tears trickling down his face as he said, "It is auspicious. I offer it to my guru Naropa." And simultaneously he made with his hands the motion of offering something. He next took hold of the handle rings and shook them violently, and struck the vessel with a rod, making as loud a noise thereby as he possibly could. Finally, he took the vessel over to the end of the altar and laid it there, filling it with clarified butter for burning in the altar lamps. Being much concerned about my liberation, I repeatedly entreated him to bestow upon me some instruction, whereupon he said, "I have a number of devoted disciples and lay followers in the Yu and Sang provinces who would much like to come here, but they have been repeatedly robbed on the way by nomad shepherds of the Yomdok and Talong, as well as by the Lingpas. Thus frequently plundered, they are prevented from coming here with any provisions or presents. Go thou and launch a plague of hail upon the robbers. That itself is a religious duty. Afterwards I will then give thee instruction in the truth." Accordingly, I went and launched a terrific hailstorm on each of the places mentioned, and returning, asked for the instruction promised. But the Lama replied, "What? Thou presumest to ask for the most sacred Dharma, which I procured at such cost and self-sacrifice from India, in return for 2 or 3 paltry hailstones? Now, sir, if thou art really in earnest about the truth, thou wilt go and by means of sorcery, in which thou claimest to be an adept, destroy a number of the Lobrock hillmen. For these also have often robbed disciples of mine who have been on their way here from the Yalaro, and frequently offered indignities to myself as well. If thou can work some signal piece of havoc in the proof of the magical power, I will undertake to impart the mystic truths handed down to me by my revered guru, the great Pandit Naropa, truths whereby one can gain liberation in a single lifetime and attain to Buddhahood." Again I did as I was bidden, and my magical curse taking effect among the Lobrock Hill men, a feud broke out among them, and in the fighting many of them were killed. The sight of the bloodshed, however, affected me with the deepest remorse and anguish. My guru, perceiving that among the killed were several of those who had offended him, said to me, "It is quite true that thou art an adept in sorcery." And he gave me the title of the great sorcerer. Upon my asking him again for the saving truths, he said, "Ha ha! Must I give thee the most sacred truths, which I brought from India with such great pains, expending all my worldly goods in gold for them? Truths which still emit the holy breath of the angelic beings who gave them, and all in return for thy having done evil deeds. Why, sir, that would be such a great jest as would make everybody laugh. Were, if anyone else save myself, he would have killed thee for such a presumption. Now, sir, thou shalt go and make good all the mischief and damage which thou hast caused to the crops of the shepherd folk, and restore to life the killed among the Lobrock men. If thou can do that, well and good, I will let thee have the truths. If thou cannot, thou hadst better not enter my presence again." Thus the Lama scolded me as if about to beat me. As for myself, I was plunged into the depths of despair and wept bitterly, the Lama's wife the while seeking to comfort me. The next morning, the Lama was kind enough to come to me himself and say, "I fear I was a little too hard on thee yesterday evening, but do not take it too much to heart. Have patience and wait, and thou shalt have the teachings. But thou seemest to me to be a handy person. I should therefore like thee to build a house for my son Dharma Dude. The youth, the bouquet of the sutras is his name. When thou hast completed it, not only will I impart the truths to thee, but I will also supply thee with all needful food and clothing for the period of thy study." "But what will happen to me if in the interval I happen to die undelivered?" I urged. And he answered, "I promise thee that thou shalt not die undelivered in the interval. Mine is not a doctrine empty of all definite promise. So as thou appearest to possess a considerable stock of energy and perseverance, thou canst please thyself, with none to hinder whether thou obtainest the deliverance in one lifetime or not. My sect is not quite the same as other sects. In it are to be found more emanation of divine grace waves and a more direct spiritual revelation than in any other sect." Consoled and rejoiced by these comforting promises, I at once asked the Lama for a plan of the proposed house. Now, in asking me to do this work for him, the Lama, as I subsequently perceived, had three objects in view. Firstly, not having been included in an oath-taking party held by his male relatives on a certain place of strategic importance, whereby it was agreed that no stronghold should be erected, he wished to build a house there, for the site was very desirable, being safe and not easily reached, and closed forever to those who had taken the oath. Secondly, he wished me to expiate mine evil deeds. And thirdly and lastly, he wished to mislead the aforementioned parties into allowing him to proceed unopposed with the building of his house on the site he desired. He had recourse to the following stratagem. He took me to a mountain ridge having an eastern aspect, and pointing out a particular place, described a circular structure and ordered me to begin building it there. And this I at once did. When I had finished about half of it, he came along and said that when giving me my orders at the outset, he had not well considered the matter, and that I must stop work on the building and demolish it, and carry back to the place whence I had taken them the earth and stones I had used. When I had carried out this order, the Lama, appearing to me to be intoxicated, took me to a ridge having a western aspect, and ordering me to build another house there, after describing a crescent-shaped ground plan, and then he went away. When I had built this house up to about half the height required, the Lama again came to me while I was working and said that even this house would not do, and I must restore the clay and stones to the places whence I had taken them. Again, I obeyed his commands. Once more, the Lama took me away, this time to a ridge with a northern aspect, and there addressed me thus: "My great sorcerer, I seem to have been tipsy when I last told thee to build a house, and so gave thee a mistaken order. Apparently it was a thorough mistake all through, but now thou shalt build me a really nice house on this site." I ventured to observe that it was a useless expense and a great trouble to me, and to be over and over again building up and pulling down houses. I entreated him to consider matters well, and then to give me his orders. He said, "I am not tipsy today, and I have thought well over the matter. A tantric mystic's dwelling ought to be triangular, so build me one of that shape. This one shall not be demolished." So I proceeded to build a triangular-shaped house. When I had finished about a third of it, the Lama one day came down and said, "Who gave thee the order to build a house like this?" And I answered, "Why, it is the house for thy reverend son, and was ordered by thyself." And he said, "I have no recollection of having given thee any such order. But if it be as thou sayest, then it must have been at a time when I was not in full possession of my senses, or I must have been mad outright." I urged, "But fearing that something of this kind might happen, I ventured to impress upon thy reverence the necessity of careful consideration. And then thou wert pleased to assure me that thou hadst carefully considered everything, and that this building should not be demolished. And thy reverence at the time appeared to be in a perfectly normal state of mind." The Lama replied, "What witness hast thou for this? What? Wert thou seeking to destroy me and mine by means of sorcery, or what? By thrusting us into this triangular building of thine, which looketh like a magical triangle? Why, man, I have not robbed thee of thy patrimony. Besides, if thou art really anxious for religious instruction, why, the very shape of this house is enough to set all the local deities against thee. See then that thou demolish it at once, and take all the stones and clay back where thou didst find them. Thereupon I will give thee the instruction thou desirest, or else thou canst go away." And the Lama went off, apparently very angry. I was very much grieved at this, but there was no help for it. I stood in need of the truth, and so had no other choice but to demolish the triangular house like the others, and to do as bidden with the materials. By this time I had a big sore on my back, between my shoulder and my spine, but I did not dare to show it to the Lama, who I feared would be displeased if I did so. Neither did I venture to show it to his wife, lest she should think I wanted her to notice how hard I was working for them. So I kept my misery to myself, and only solicited her aid in praying to the Lama to give me the promised instruction. The motherly lady kindly went to her husband and said, "My lord, thine useless building undertakings are only wearing out the poor youth's life. Pray take pity on him now, and give him some instruction." The Lama answered, "Get a nice dinner ready and bring him to me." The lady accordingly prepared some food and led me in. The Lama then said to me, "Great sorcerer, do not falsely accuse me, as thou didst yesterday, of things which I have not done. As for instruction, I now give it to thee." And he imparted to me the 4 formulas of the refuges. with the prayers and injunctions and vows, and added, "These are called temporal religious instructions. But if thou seek the non-temporal religious instructions or the mystic truths, thou must do such and such things in order to merit them." And he proceeded to recite a brief story from the life of his guru Naropa, and ended up by saying, "But thou wilt hardly be able to attain to such ideal height as this. That will be too difficult for thee, I fear." Hearing this, I was so moved to the very depths of my heart with faith that I was unable to repress my tears, and I inwardly resolved to do whatever the Lama commanded.